you're going to do something else in your life. Everybody can't be, Rashad Evans or Michael Bisping or an announcer or a play-by-play guy, and that's what everybody thinks they're going to do.
This is Dave Meltzer here with Entrepreneurs, the Playbook, and I have the toughest guest I've ever had on. That's not only because he's born in Ohio. I have Forrest Griffin, world champion, UFC fighter, Hall of Famer. But most importantly now, we have this great establishment, the UFC Performance Institute, which you are the Vice President of Athlete Development for. And we had a tour earlier, and all I kept thinking as you toured me around this facility is,
we stole this stuff from some good people.
Right.
We stole it from the best. That's what you're thinking.
It's like the Taj
wow,
Mahal, right? Everything was
just stole everything. Yeah.
But it's awesome. But tell me about how far the UFC has come with performance compared to, you won the biggest fight of all time. And even Dana White says it was the catalytic fight of all time in 2005.
It's like the turning point, right? So it was one of those things. But think about, you have all these other things that aren't necessarily specifically fighting, right? So you have the kicking, punching, grappling, and MMA schools do a great job of teaching that. MMA schools, trainers, coaches, there's some great coaches doing that. But how often are those guys really working with actual certified strength conditioning specialists, registered dietitians, physical therapists? A lot of times you have a massage therapist and maybe a buddy that used to be a bodybuilder, and or you played college football and you're like, oh, I got this lifting program from football, but it's not individualized for you. And MMA is the best sport for individualization, right? Think about John Jones and Cormier. It would be insane for those guys to do the same workouts, different ages, different body types, different years of experience, right? So with every other sport like football, basketball, baseball, you train for your position. Think about defensive end. They all look the same. They all need the same physical attributes. But in fighting, your game plan, your background, everything about you, did you wrestle, you're not going to train Stephen Thompson like you would even, T. Wood.
Right.
These people have different body types, different backgrounds, different training ages, and you want to train for that, right? So you want to be the best you possibly, and then you want to take in your anthropomorphics and let that shape some of your fighting style. Like Tyson, man, he does not have that, his arms are not that long. He's a short guy. He was fighting the guys that were like 6'5", 6'6", with longer arms, and he was beating them because he used the movement. He had a tactic to cover that distance, right? So our fighters kind of have to do the same thing, and then they have to train to have that physiological skill, to have that physiological ability to develop the skill to close that distance or keep that distance or push their opponent to the fence or circle, whatever it may be, right?
It's incredible when you walk around here. The technology allows you to have such insight with the experts that you have, the PhDs, the world-renowned doctors. But even to the point, one of the most interesting things you told me was that you had seen through, what's your degree in again? BT?
Oh, my degree?
Been there, done that?
BTDT.
BTDT. Yeah. So you have to mix, though, that emotional intelligence, that understanding of being there, but you actually then apply it to science, meaning what's important in this, not the speed, right? You were telling me it's important as you move, it's not necessarily how strong you are.
It's a rate of force development, right? So it's things specific to the sport, right? It's the same as basketball, change your direction. These are the things that make for a good athlete in an open sport, right? So in a closed sport, think about you're doing the exact same thing, then it becomes like, bobsled is a great example. Those are great physical attributes, but that is a very close sport. You're doing one thing, right? Our sport is the most open sport there is. Think about it. Every other sport is a little more defined, right? You got to get a ball in the hoop.
Speed skating,
you gotta,
go fast and go left.
Yeah.
Right?
It's again, super closed. Fighting, it's not only so open, but it's new, right? So it's 25 years old. Legitimately, the sport's 25 years old. So it's new stuff's happening every day. And what we were talking about earlier, and I said, hey, save it for the interview, I got a good one. You know what's changed the game? YouTube, the internet. So now, in my day, Now you don't say, oh, I gotta save this, hide this technique. You can't hide the technique. There's a million billion fights. Somebody's doing the technique, somebody's showing it already. So now what you do is you get the technique out as fast as you can, and you say, first, basically, hey, I want to show you this type of arm drag when I do this. Oh, okay. And now 1,000 kids see that, and now they're doing that. So what's that done? What that has done is speed up the evolution of the game. In my day, I paid somebody $75 for a seminar, so we kind of cloistered that knowledge in, And a lot of boxers are still like this. They don't want you to see their drills. They don't want you to know. And I'm like, hey man, I'm watching these drills for free on somebody else's Instagram. So you trying to sell DVDs is not the greatest. So what you really have to sell is yourself now, right? So I have to show you that I can do X, Y, and Z in these drills or these techniques, and then you come in and I work with you, right? So now I gotta market myself and sell myself as opposed to just selling you a book or a DVD.
Which is so important because this whole business model with the Performance Institute is that the UFC started realizing the value of the fighter, or athlete, I should say, but they started seeing that.
You can say fighter.
Yeah, and early on too, there was that argument that the fighters were not valued. And now I see a major shift. I mean, you guys give so much for free here to the fighters to make sure they perform well and last.
So one thing I'll say without sounding like too much of a kiss ass is if you walk the halls here and you meet the people, 60% of 70% of the staff here, they're trying to make the athlete's life a little bit easier. They're trying to make them more popular. They want you to be, rich, famous, etc. They want your flights to be as easy. They want you to get the most out of the media you have to do. So you think about all the people, that really work really hard here to get the athletes where they need to be, get them the best flights, make things as convenient for them as possible. And then you think about a place like this, like our goals in the UFC Performance Institute are very similar, if not the exact same as the athlete's goals, right? So we want you to be healthier. We want you to be able to fight as often as you can. We want you to have as easy as time as possible making weight, walk around healthy, close to your fighting weight. And if you do get hurt, we want you to recover as fast as possible. I like to use Cody Garbrandt as an example. He was on top of the world, and then he took a year off. And so that popularity didn't grow. People forgot about him. He hadn't fought in a year, right? So it was like, how Cody? So the UFC had to spend that money and try to build him back up again. And then you think about like a guy, I wish we'd had something more to do with his, with him. He's getting to the Hall of Fame this year. Who's a crazy bird? Michael Bisping. Here's a guy, he becomes like famous. So he's built up this aura, and then late in his career, he becomes champ. And that's when he starts making all the money, is that last third or fourth of his career. That's when he made all his money. That's when he was super popular out. That's when he sold, some famous British Coliseum out in like 8 minutes. That's when he was like, so your money, your big money, like a guy like DC, your big money is going to come at the back end of your career. So if you can stay healthier when you're young, train smarter, develop better habits, the back half of your career is going to be a lot more lucrative for you, the athlete. And then when you do retire, it's going to make that transition a little bit easier because you have more money, just more cushion, right? More leeway. Again, fighting's not your forever job. We just kind of briefly talked about it, but you're going to do something else in your life. Everybody can't be, Rashad Evans or Michael Bisping or an announcer or a play-by-play guy, and that's what everybody thinks they're going to do. But a lot of us will run gyms. I just run the best gym.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but you also have this great perspective. I mean, you've written these Zen books, which is incredible. But moreover, I see a lot of athletes that talk, but they don't walk the walk when it comes to transitioning into business. Where you have this unique perspective, you really see things on a business level.
When I've seen this before, myself included. I want to be a businessman. But I don't have the education. And the truth is, I'm too lazy to learn it. It's not impossible stuff. You can learn it. So when an athlete retires and they're going to go start their own gym, I say, look, the front half of the house. Half. You don't know how to do the books. You don't know how to do the taxes. You better find somebody you can trust to do the back half of the house for you, or you better learn how to do it. Have your husband or wife do it, So that's what you have to understand. And then a lot of athletes get into business and say, I'm good. I'm a good public speaker. I can handle myself in a room full of people. I got important stuff to say, but Are you willing to do the homework? Do you have the background knowledge? Like, you've been doing business stuff since you were what, 17, 18?
Right, exactly.
I've been doing business stuff since I was 35.
Right.
All right, that's a tough gap to bridge. I didn't go to college for that. I got a degree in political science. So if you want to know about like nuclear non-proliferation, I can help you out. Right. Circa 2000. Anything other than that, I got nothing.
Right on.
So yeah.
Now, you do have mentorship though. You know, one of the things about the UFC is, you know, they always say the fish is rotten from the head down, but you know, like any team, league, organization, or business, when you have great leaders, it seems to trickle down. And I see the UFC always succeeding because the Fertittas and Dana and all these guys are so not only successful, but they mentor everybody.
Now it's Lawrence and Pete, and you know, we have a great. So it's not just the leadership team, it's like a clearly understandable vision. So that they have a vision that they can relay to me, that I can relay to the people that work for me, right? So is there a vision, a direction? You know, for me now, my direction is, hey, we need to make this thing a thing in China, right? It's kind of the cusp, right? They're ready. It's 2005 or 6 over there, like in the States. It's a good time to develop that market.
Yeah,
despite what
it's going to be incredible. Yeah. Now, mixed martial arts is so many different disciplines, and you know, as someone who's more a sports business person, a sports technology person, I'm consistently watching it, going, what discipline? Because I have so many different disciplines in business that I'm good at, right? I have a law degree, a business, all technology, sports. Now, for you, what is the most, do you think, powerful discipline for the sport?
Let me give you two answers. One, so any form like wrestling, judo, the ability to control where the fight happens. If you're like Chuck and you're a good wrestler and you can, you know, avoid the takedown and make the fight a standing fight. You know, just the ability to control where the fight happens. And then the other thing is what kids have today, everything. So they started learning it all. I remember seeing this even when I was still training and competing every day. I'd see 14-year-olds that had a very similar skill set to mine. But they'd, you know, because they'd started doing everything. They didn't think, you know, this, that, the other. I remember in Singapore, I was teaching kids, like elementary school kids, martial arts, and they said, "Oh, you did karate?" And I was like, "I've never done karate." And they're like, "Those are karate kicks." And I was like, "Oh, it's just martial arts to me. It's just mixed martial. I've never done karate a day in my life." But these kids are like, "No, that you're doing karate." Okay, I think that's, you know, it's like when you master something, and then you forget it and make it up as you go.
And obviously on the marketing side, the boxer versus the mixed martial artist became a big deal, where to me, as a business person in sport, I saw as a
boxer, maybe.
Yeah, but like the straight boxer, right? Like that's such a small discipline of mixed martial arts that I thought it was incredibly unfair to have ever a mixed martial art in a boxing ring, strictly just for professional boxing. Did you see it differently? Like, I thought there was no way that you could, a great boxer would lose in a boxing match to any of the MMA guys.
Oh, a great boxer?
Yeah, in a boxing match.
In a boxing? No.
Yeah.
You're a boxer.
But it was a great marketing ploy, right?
Yeah. You know, you
I just had to get it out there because
you're a boxer.
I'm a business guy.
Your whole life. So I couldn't wrestle with Olympic level wrestlers. I couldn't jits with Olympic level jits guys. I couldn't box with Olympic level boxers, kickbox with world champion Muay Thai guys, but I could do it all. Right.
So and they could never get into an octagon with
you. And even like who would win in an actual fight, the MMA guy always wins because he goes in knowing this guy will knock me out if I try and stand over. So I'm going to dive in on his legs immediately, right? So then it becomes unfair for the boxer because, you know, if you actually thought a boxer could wrestle and you didn't know he was just a boxer, he might hurt you.
And then another thing I noticed as we walked around, there's so much visual aids as far as recording, and you took this big screen and you showed us what he should do. Has that changed the sport in the respect that there's something actually as a smart fighter now where they can study and
film studies changed every sport. We've just, as an MMA, been a little behind, or you know, we're doing it, but we're doing it on a cell phone, you know, like okay, and then you can't really you know, I like to look at it like you're only going to fight 2.6 times a year, or 2 to 4 times per year is the average for UFC fighters. So if you get close to that injury, 15 minutes, 30 minutes a week, you're going game speed, as I like to say. Record that and treat it like your fight. And the other thing is, like, the film doesn't lie. Your coach is like, put your hands up. My hands are up, coach. And your hands are not up. Your knees are straight. You look like, what do you think about that? Oh, okay. Well, I don't love the way I look there. I need to bend my knees, and I'm not. So the film doesn't lie.
And speaking of film, the business of this sport is, I see, still in the infantile state. It's 25 years old, like you said, but because of the reach of video, and just entering China, for example, how big do you think the UFC can become?
Well, I think mixed martial arts will be the second most popular sport behind football proper.
In just America, but worldwide?
No, worldwide.
So football proper, good, yeah, sorry.
Football.
That's soccer, just in case no one knows, okay?
So the rest of the world.
Do you think it could be bigger than football?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But so there's a ceiling, right? There's a saturation point. We might be close to that in the States. At the end of the day, it's fighting, right? So it's people fighting. There's going to be blood. There's going to be joints getting popped. I don't mind the blood when the joints get popped. Like, oh, jeez, I don't need to see that. So not everybody's always going to be in it. And then people will transition out of it as they get older. That's fine. I knew that we'd made it. I shouldn't say it like that. I knew that the sport was going to be okay when my mother's friends started calling me up, asking me about Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture. How's that? That Randy's such a nice guy. You're not going to let that Chuck hurt him, are you? I was like, oh my gosh. Like, these are my mother's, 45-year-old women, this 46-year-old women. I think this sport could be the future. There could be something happening here. I feel like there's a lot of growth internationally because there's just not exposure to it, right? So then you need a Chinese star, you need a Brazilian star, you need Irish, whatever. You need a Canadian star now that GSP is retired. So as long as you have something to kind of represent you and your people, you're gonna be all right.
Speaking of those individuals, all sports are going to an individual brand, right? And there's a conflict between leagues, organizations, teams, and allowing the individual athlete to brand themselves.
Well, there shouldn't be in this because those athletes are independent contractors. And at the end of the day, I don't know how to say this politically correct, but you might not always fight for the UFC. You might go fight somewhere else. So you need to let the UFC build you. You need to get up at 7 a.m. and go to that interview to build your brand, because that's what you're going to have. Whether you fight for somebody else, whether you retire and you're doing public speaking, that is your moment. That is your opportunity to shine. And I'll tell you personally, it sucks. Because 2008, 2009, my phone did not stop ringing. I turned down movies, I turned down this, I turned down that. I wrote part of another book, but at the end of the day, I wanted to train, right? I had too much going on. I didn't, there were business opportunities I didn't get into because, it was just too much. Everybody wanted me. Around 2012, 2013.
Crickets.
Nobody's answering my calls. I'm calling all these people back from 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
Who? Yeah. It was when you were fighting, and that's something Ronda Rousey did very well, right?
Yeah.
So she never lost that momentum. She kind of kept going, and she's like, all right, I'm transitioning right here. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think they've learned from people like you. And it's interesting because working with so many Hall of Famers, the worst part of that is not only the crickets and the less revenue coming in, it's everyone else's perception that does know you thinks just automatically because you were, the Hall of Fame quarterback or Hall of Fame fighter, that everything's still that way. And so I see a lot of opportunities not given to the Hall of Famers because some of the corporate executives are out there going, oh, he's doing fine, right? And it's like, or even that you'd be too expensive. And they're just so surprised that Hall of Famers will go out there and do that.
Well, here's the other thing I'll say. So it's a fine line. You look at fighting, very mental sport. You want to know, as far as training, that you did everything in your power to win that fight. So that when you get in the octagon and the gate closes, yada yada, dramatic music effects, hey, I've done everything in my power to prepare myself for this fight. I'm a little overtrained. I didn't go do that 3-day junket where I could have made 40 grand in 3 days. I didn't do that because I knew that this is my bread and butter. This is how, so, as you get kind of famous, the flip side of that coin is don't forget the horse that got you to the dance, right? Don't forget the girl that took you to the dance the first time. You got there because you were good at fighting. All right, now if you can make some opportunities off that, that's great. But once you forget about I train all day, I fight, you know, and then you're like, well, I do this and I do that, and I write a book, and I'm going to be on a TV show, and then you're not training anymore. Then it ends that way too.
So last question, you know, it's a very difficult sport. And, you know, like you said, that anyone that thinks getting into an octagon is going to be good for you in the long run, you know, they're crazy.
It's good for your financial health, short term, for sure.
And a lot of parents right now struggle with allowing their kids to play football, and the sport has changed.
Or boxing, or anything.
Any collision sport.
Play soccer. My daughter does gymnastics. I saw a kid break his arm at the thing the other day.
Mine's the flyer in cheerleading, which is the most dangerous. Really? Yeah. You know, and parents, I have to tell this, I know we're running out of time, but the one thing that shocked me, because you've no crazy fans, I'm sitting at this, you know, I'm not a big guy, so my daughter's 5 feet and 90 pounds. And they throw her, you know, 12 feet in the air, and it's a competition, and one of the moms next to me goes, drop her. And I was like, is this where we're getting to in sports? That I'm like, it actually could kill my daughter. And you are rooting for someone to drop her so your cheerleading team can win. And she's 14 years old on the world team. I'm like, I didn't know. I'm like, told my wife, stand here because I'm leaving because I'm about to drop her. But anyway, getting to this last point. I
wanted to say something.
Oh, my wife did. She's much tougher than me. Last question though, would you allow, if you had a son, would you allow him?
I tried to get my daughter to do jits.
Did you?
And then, you know, she's all right with it. You know, I think definitely young women, and my daughter's actually relatively small too. It's great. You should do some sort of jits, wrestling, combat sport, just defense, handiness, martial arts, everything about it I love. But so the answer is yes.
Good.
But for my daughter, she was braiding hair like with another girl on the side, and I was like,
they're born that way.
This is not her passion. It's never going to be.
I really appreciated not only the tour, but the interview. You brought a lot of light. I don't think a lot of people really understand what great business acumen you have. Your books are bestsellers in the New York Times.
It's not me. It's
you're humble and illuminating, and a great sense of humor.
Around me, and I have a good way of not getting in the way.
You're awesome. Well, this is Dave Meltzer here with Forrest Griffin, the Hall of Famer at the UFC Performance Institute, here on Entrepreneurs, the Playbook.